o'clock. We're in conference room E, and we also are remote hybrid conferencing. This meeting will be live streamed by the county channel. Requests for public comments will be accepted between 4 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. by sending an email with your name, phone number, and topic to robin.cushenberry@beaufortk-12s.sc.us. The committee members in attendance are myself, Richard Geyer, Earl Campbell, Christina Gross, and Rachel Wisniewski. We start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda. Mr. Campbell made the motion, and Dr. Claus seconded. Is there any discussion?
No.
Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Wisniewski, aye.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you, Rachel. Now, public comments. Are there no public comments? Now would take a motion to approve the May 10th, 2022 committee meeting minutes.
Yeah.
A motion by Dr. Claus, a second by Mr. Campbell. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, everyone that approves this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Wisniewski, aye.
All opposed, there are none. Motion carries. The first item on the agenda is the Minority and Woman-Owned Business Enterprise Report. Ms. Crosby?
Yes, good evening. I'm going to introduce the topic, and if you have any questions, I also have Jennifer Hamlin here, our Director of Budget and Procurement, and Kaylee Junior is on virtually with us this evening as well, the procurement coordinator. And so if I have any really hard questions, I'll get them to help me. All right, so this is the Minority Women-Owned Business Enterprise Report that we do twice a year to the board. It is a requirement of the procurement code to provide this reporting. And so it is in an effort to meet the board's goals of a 20% of a controllable budget that would be spent on minority business-owned contracts, procurement, supplies. And in addition, we're still also at the same time providing a listing of sole source and emergency procurement, which is required also of the procurement code. And so that listing is on page 2 with all of the individual vendors, amounts, and the rationale or a description of this type of service that's being provided. So again, this is for reporting period July 1 through December 31. And this is brought a little later than I had anticipated. We have had the information for quite a while. That's on me. I have had quite a number of heavy issues relating to budget and bonds and those sorts of things. So this reporting was pushed back a little further than I would typically bring that. So the funds expended during this time, the total controllable budget dollar amount is actually $138.9 million for that 6-month period. The goal of 20% that's established brings us to spending of 27, that would be represent $28 million worth of spending. And so for purposes of the certified minority women business enterprises, there were about $963,000 of spending that occurred with certified businesses, and then uncertified businesses amounted to another $5.3 million. So if we combine the two of all awards to minority women-owned businesses, both certified and uncertified, it amounted to about $6.3 million for that 6-month period, representing about 4.5% of the controllable budget. There were about 11 solicitations that were made from minority and women-owned businesses. 4 bids were received and 1 contract was awarded. So, and then there were no bids received from certified businesses in the area of construction or renovation. So I reiterate some of the dollars and the actual contracts awarded, and then provide a second page, a summary of historical percentages, the goals versus actuals. And we are down a little from the prior 6 months. There's, a heavy amount of construction going on, but this would have rounded out the construction in the early summer of last year, payments in the summer of last year, and those services that were paid for during that period of time. So again, all of the sole source and emergency procurement items would be here. Sole source being there is only one vendor that can provide a certain service or supply that's specific to the needs of the district. And then emergency procurement would be if there was a fire or a flood or some structural damage of a building that needed immediate repair to prevent life safety issues from occurring. So with that, I'll be happy to open it up for any discussion.
Any questions or Dr. Wisniewski?
Yes, sir. I did have one question on the contracts that were canceled. Can you tell us typically why does one get canceled and why were these?
Ms. Yinger, are you on?
She just got on.
Available? Okay.
My apologies. We had that bad storm roll through and my internet connectivity is not great. I missed the question. Could you repeat?
Yes, ma'am. Under goods and services, there were 2 canceled contracts, and I was just wondering if you could tell us about those.
Give me just a second and I will pull that data for you.
Thank you.
Nothing is wanting to behave this evening, it seems, on the computer at all. If anybody has any additional questions besides that until I can pull the data on my computer, I'll be more than happy to answer that while I'm looking for this information.
Dr. Wisniewski, do you have any other questions?
No, sir, that was the only one.
Okay, I have a question. The sole source for BRC, Student Services, could you tell me what the BRC for Student Services, why that's a sole source?
That's a vital records company that we currently use to transcribe paper records to electronic, and they also destroy records for us after so many years. They've had our business for a number of years at this point, and it would actually be fiscally irresponsible to move away from them. The cost would be astronomical. So they've been sole sourced at this point, of only being the only provider to be able to provide those services for us at this time.
All right, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions?
I'll tell you what,
We'll come back.
could you make sure that we have this by Tuesday at our board meeting?
I sure can, or I can have the information here. And if you give me actually about 1 more minute, I can pull it up for you. The internet's finally
Okay, we can wait.
cooperating. I appreciate it. Thank you. Right. Pulling from June of 2021 until December of 2021, we canceled video streaming products and services with fixed pricing, and we canceled plumbing services IDC, which is an indefinite delivery contract. Neither one of those solicitations received any interest. We didn't receive any proposals or any bids for either one of those, so we canceled and reissued after that.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Are there any other questions? Hearing none, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And we'll move to this next item on the agenda, which is the proposed tax anticipation note
Yes.
of 5.7 or $7.5 million.
Yes, sir. This evening I have provided an executive summary for you. And also on the line is Brian Nurick this evening for if we have any questions relating to the bonds in particular for this subject and the next agenda item as well. So the TAN is actually, well, just wanted to provide a brief background of the need for the TAN, how we calculate the dollar amount, and then how, the timing of the funds that are needed. So the TAN is calculated by basically taking the fund balance at the end of a fiscal year that we're projecting. We're adding in the revenues by month and then also subtracting expenditures by month. So when we do this, we have to calculate not only the general fund, but take into consideration any special revenue funds that may be coming in during that period of time as well. And also that would include ESSER funds. So we have moved from a quarterly claiming process and reimbursement process to a monthly reimbursement so that it helps to minimize the need for the TAN. So that there's not an advance, because that is such significant spending, sometimes anywhere from $500,000 to $2 or $3 million per month, depending on what the timing of what we're purchasing, that it could be substantial if you're waiting for 3 or 4 months to get reimbursement. So we have moved to a monthly process. So we do expect to borrow less. Last year we borrowed $15 million, and this year we're proposing $7.5 million. And that the reasoning behind that is that partially both the ESSER funds, and we do expect that some of our revenues are increased at the local and state, will be increased at the local and state level, providing a little more funding in those months between July and November, which are the critical time frames. We're at our lowest point in October, according to this document, and then some larger state revenues start coming in November after that. So we are very conservative in our estimates, expecting the unexpected, predicting the unexpected. For example, we may receive a monthly payment of $5 million from the State Department, generally starting in October. Well, this assumes we may receive it in November, for example, just in case that we don't receive certain payments like that. So we are lowering it almost in half, or yes, definitely in half, and are requesting approval this year of $7.5 million. So.
And that will be paid back in spring?
Yes, it would be drawn down in the fall. So we have options of a taxable or a tax exempt note. And so those would slightly alter the timing in which we drew it down or paid it back, but it would definitely be paid back in no later than spring of 2023. But we really need the cash. Basically, this is the cash in the bank at certain points in time. So these would give us an infusion of cash during a time, but also happens to be hurricane season. So it gives us a sort of a safety net there to make sure that we can make the payroll and weekly accounts payable payments to vendors, but also to give us a little bit of coverage during hurricane season.
Any questions by members of the committee? Dr. Boss?
I move that the Board of Education Finance Committee recommend to the full board the approval of the tax anticipation note in the amount of $7,500,000.
Got a second from Mr. Campbell? Yep, got that typed up. Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Dr. Wisniewski, do you have any questions?
No, sir.
Thank you. Tanya, is it fair to say that the revenue increase that we received on the ad valorem taxes this year contributed to this smaller amount of the 10?
Yes, I believe so. That does help support throughout the year. But majority of the ad valorem taxes are received in December and January. Also, we do expect some. There could possibly be some additions to fund balance as well, and so that could help support and that would help support minimize the dollar amount.
The reason I bring that up is that it looks like our revenue is going to exceed our budget projections this year. And one of the things the county council may bring up is, well, we have increased revenue, and they have had increased revenue. Why, what are you doing with that money? And this is one of the things we're doing with that money.
Absolutely, yes.
And it's also interesting to me. Please explain more how you're able to go from a quarterly aspect for ESSER funds to a monthly. So how are you doing that?
So our financial software, we can capture information or expenditures by period. So period 1 is July, period 2 August, and so on. So it was our understanding when we began the claiming process, claiming meaning we say we've spent these dollars in these categories, we submit it to the State Department, and they review it and ask questions and then reimburse payment directly to the county treasurer's office. So it was our understanding that they were required to be quarterly reimbursements, and many of our federal programs are claimed that way. However, we inquired to the State Department and found that we are allowed, at a minimum, you must do claims every 3 months, but you may do it every single month. So we determined, now it is more work on staff, but we determined at least in the fall that we needed to be submitting payments on claims on a monthly basis because of our cash flow situation. So we changed our very large federal programs, Title I, IDEA, and ESSER funds to a monthly claiming process during the period between July and December. And then we can revert back to claiming quarterly if needed in the spring where cash flows are not an issue. So we just asked the State Department, they said yes. And so we just began to do it and it's working out well.
So that really tells me that we may be able to someday get to a fund balance that would eliminate the need for a TAN.
Yes, that is the goal. So if we continue in the manner in which we are now, and especially as the ESSER funds will expire in 2024, September of 2024. So we may be in a position where we won't need a TAN, at least by that point.
Because
as long as our fund balance is as good or better
Right.
than the position
Right.
it is in now.
and the reason that to me is important is when we go and get our credit rating, that's one of the little negatives. It's not a big negative, but it is a little negative in there about, well, you need to have a tax anticipation note. You know, if you had a sufficient fund balance, you wouldn't need to do that. So that's just, I think it hasn't proven to be a major issue, but criteria for awarding credit rating in the future may become more rigorous. I would like to not have any negative comments in a fund balance presentation. I mean,
Credit rating report, yes.
presentation. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to have a vote on the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Wisniewski, aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is referendum bond issuance update and timeline. I believe, Brian, you are up, man.
Actually, Tanya's up. She told me
Tanya, you're up.
she told me she was going to handle it.
We tackled this together, actually. Mr. Nurick and I took information from both the timeline he provided and then the credit rating, straight from the credit rating reports that we received last week, and then just some summary details that both of us provided input on for the competitive results. So it was a joint effort to develop this summary for you. And so just to get started on the timeline. So on April 19th, as a reminder, the board voted unanimously to approve the third and final issuance of the 2019 referendum bonds in the amount of $139.6 million. So the first step immediately following that is a preliminary official statement. It's basically, maybe misstating this, but it's basically a marketing tool document to advertise to potential bidders, investors that would be interested in buying our bonds. So that document is prepared, a combination of efforts from bond counsel, financial advisor, and our staff. And those documents, that offering statement was sent to both Moody's Investor Services and Standard & Poor's. So that set the stage for bond rating calls the following week. On May 16th and 17th, we had a rating call each day, and they asked a lot of questions about the state of the economy, what sort of growth are you seeing? They asked about enrollment, what you expect to happen in the future with regard to enrollment. They want to see your budget, so they'll ask questions about, are you using fund balance, or have you grown your fund balance? Are you projecting to add to the fund balance this year, and if so, why? So a lot of both economic and financial questions and operational questions about our the state of our financial position. In addition to that, they're very interested in policies, financial policies that the board has created. And they were particularly interested in a couple of, at least one policy, and that was one that was very unique to our school district, and that is the policy that was about the placing a floor on the debt capacity of 10% of the insured value of all the properties of the entire county. So they really liked having kind of a floor or a set of reserves in your 8% capacity to be able to address things in case of an emergency. So it really helps to mitigate risk and keeps that those reserves up into a very high level. So they were very, both firms singled that particular policy out as something that was unique to our district, and they found it very interesting and very favorable in terms of our rating. So also, there were a few other policies that we discussed. Can't recall any other particular, definitely bringing the fund balance to a level that helps to eliminate the TAN. That is also a board policy. And so it's something that we're working toward moving forward. But we did have increased fund balance the last couple of years, so that was a particular interest as well, and really helped to solidify and affirm the current ratings that we have with Moody's, and then established a former rating we had with Standard & Poor's. And so we have the best levels that our district can be afforded. I believe we match Greenville County School District on the Moody's rating at a AA. And so we have, without having industry in the county and maybe a higher fund balance, this is it's an excellent rating, and it's the maximum amount we could really be able to attain. So the rating reports took about a week to prepare on their half. They run through a lot of reviews and I think discussions. They run them a draft by us. We monitor, we review it, provide comments. They go back and release final reports. And then the preliminary official statement is then released to the bond market. And we had the competitive bid on June 2nd. It's an electronic process, so we can see it. Our financial advisor can see it electronically, our bond counsel, and we can all be on a conference call and watch the bids come in. So it's an interesting process. I actually took my laptop over into the budget office, and we let the rest of the team watch as well for the first time. And so they had a lot of good questions. And so one of the main things is that the timing of this bid was very important to Brian and his work, because he was anticipating a 2-day Fed meeting coming up, which would prevent or provide some event risk and potential of a Fed increase in interest rates. So that would be coming up early next week. And he wanted to make sure that this bid occurred before that date. So the timing was really critical. And so, and I'll show some results in just a moment, but basically we do expect to have the pre-closing on the 21st of this month, and then the final closing of bonds on the 23rd, which that would be the point at which the cash would be wired into our treasurer's accounts, and the cash would be available for spending. So just a couple quick notes on the credit ratings. I think I sent an email out to the board because with the good news, but this just reiterates that the great, excellent interest bond ratings that we received, and they really praised us on sound financial management and prudent budgeting and capital planning, and sound, robust managerial policies and practices. Board policies, and then our long-term planning and conservative budgeting. So, very favorable comments that they made as well. And on the competitive bid, there were 9 bids, investment firms, and the winning bid had was a net interest cost of 3.12. Brian, I believe, had predicted about a 3.5% rate, so we came in about 40 basis points lower than expected. Is that right, Brian?
Correct.
Yes. And so, again, the timing of the bidding was very important, and it was just, we hit it at just the right time. And even Brian was proud of the bond buyer also listing our sale as a deal of the week. So it got a lot of interest, we believe, and 9 bids is really a tremendous number. So, and this in closing, Morgan Stanley was awarded as the lowest bidder. So, Brian, do you have any additional comments?
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I think, the timing was something that was discussed pretty robustly going into the sale. We have a lot of event risk with the Fed. We have a lot of event risk with CPI print. So tomorrow morning, we'll get a CPI print. It's jostled the markets a little bit. May 18th was the peak in interest rates in what's called the MMD, municipal market data that gets printed every day. And we started seeing a rally, and I actually had the bonds scheduled to sell on June 1st, and then I moved it to June 2nd, a week out, just because we wanted to kind of ride the rally. And we were in between events where the waters are a little bit calmer. And really, the market peaked on 6.1 or 6.2, and then now we've had a sell-off just after we sold the bonds. I was actually doing some work here today showing the sell-off. So very proud of the timing that we ended up hitting here. And I think, going all the way back to debt day where we talked about the flight to quality, we're seeing it. If you want to just look on your own, there are two ETFs, HYG and then JNK for junk. They're corporate bond funds. You'll see them just tanking. And that's what you're seeing. You're just seeing a sell-off in poor credit, and you're seeing a move towards high credit. So we're clearly in the high credit bucket. Regressing a little bit on the rating process, I will say that environmental risk is something they're paying more attention to. That's the term they used, environmental risk. So the 8% floor policy was something of great interest and importance to them, because it helped to bolster their analysis of liquidity. So I think that environmental risk and tying into that policy was a positive for the district. And then on fund balance, I'll just call it a best practice. You've gone last year 15 million, you've cut that in half to 7.5. And I think, I would just call it a best practice to continue to try as best as possible to grow the fund balance, so you don't have to issue a tax anticipation note. I guess in closing, there's a lot of folks, and I know we've got a lot of people that participate and help getting this, to fruition from start to the closing of the bonds. But there was sort of a dead period with Standard & Poor's, so we had to reaffirm that rating. And the bond rating calls really kind of take a lot out of you emotionally, because you're really selling yourself. And the person that does 90% of it is Tanya. So I just want to make sure that everyone recognizes Tanya for her efforts in making sure that we put our best foot forward, and all the hard work that everyone's put forward in those rating calls to affirm the AA1 with Moody's and the AA flat with Standard & Poor's. I think that's very important work and should be recognized. That's all for me.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Dr. Wisniewski?
No questions, but just wanted to tell Brian and Tanya and the finance team that I appreciate all their hard work. And also, I think that was Colonel Geyer's motion that was to make that 10% floor. So I think either him or Dick. So just wanted to say that I've got some smart brains here, and I think we're doing some good things. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian, this is a 25-year bond, correct?
Hold on a second. I think it's just shy. I think it's 20. 19 years.
19 years. Even better.
Yeah.
And bond premium?
Net bond premium, $7,381,000.
Which total bond premium that we have?
Brings us to about 32 million with the 3 bond issues.
The 3 bond issues,
Yes.
32 million.
Yes.
Okay. And I'd like to echo Dr. Wisniewski's comments to both Brian and Tanya. This is a selling job. And you got to have your stuff in a row, but also it's important to the projection that you make. And Brian, you're a pro. You've been doing this a long time. You're getting really good at this.
5 years in and working on 6, and so I've done it a few times now, and I'm getting the hang of it. So.
Yeah, I'd say so. So thank you both very much.
All right, thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. I'm going to jump off.
Thank you, Brian.
Have a good day.
Thank you. OE5, financial planning.
All right, OE5 is all about the budget. So I have provided just a one-page executive summary, hitting some of the major points of the OE. And so one of the main policies, and this is one of those that the credit rating agencies like, is to make sure that we're maintaining a floor of the fund balance no less than 10% of next year's expenditures, but a desired target of between 15 and 17% of those expenditures. So we are projected this year to be at about 17.8% of fund balance of the next year's expenditures. So we are a little slightly above that range that is expected. However, the budget, when building the budget is growing as a result of the efforts that we're making to increase teacher salaries in particular. So as the total budget rises for the next year, that percentage falls.
Yeah.
So even though the dollar amount is increasing of the fund balance, the total budgetary number is growing at a faster rate, therefore the percentage falls back down to 17.1%. So we're back down closer to just outside the range that the board has asked for. So that's really the parameters that I use when we're putting the budget together, and getting the snapshot as a whole this is one of the major parameters that I use in doing that, while also preparing a balanced budget. So revenues equal expenditures. So that's some of the criteria that I make sure are met in order to come into the full budget amount. Also, I mentioned earlier that another criteria, it's actually OE 5.2, says the fund balance should be maintained at a level that eliminates the need for a TAN. So again, we're decreasing the TAN from 15 million this year to a request of 7.5 for next year. And so we are moving toward that goal. Won't make it all in 1 year, but we will continue to strive to virtually eliminate the TAN, perhaps in FY 24. Also, the annual general fund operating budget, we reported out on, we did a few updates earlier in the year. I think there was one in March 25th, but really the numbers from the state start coming in April. So we really don't have the information, particularly the two pieces of information are critical coming from the House and the Senate. The state level, we need the revenues that are expected to be received. There's about a third of our operating budget comes from state revenue. And the other critical piece is the teacher salary mandates. So those are still not completely decided at the state level as of today. There is actually a meeting tomorrow of the conference committee in which they are discussing the budget, the annual appropriations budget. So there are constantly discussions. We've had several projections of revenue this year. I've held firm at the original House budget, both the revenue number and the teacher salary, the $4,000 that was originally projected, and we've held at that same number. And I think that's held us, it's been very good for us to stay at those original projections and not constantly make changes through the budget as they have at the state level. So it's been a more consistent message that we are able to make. And I believe that we will benefit from that consistency. So we had those basically three opportunities to see the whole budget: April 22nd, May 3rd, and May 17th, where we had the final board certification. As required of this OE, we did make sure to include details of revenues, expenditures, and what our budget assumptions were at that time. And then if any budget assumptions changed along the way, we included those in the reports as well. We reported multiple years showing the prior year's actuals, current year projections, next year's budget. And then basically we landed on just sticking with that State House of Representatives budget in terms of both revenue and the compensation increases. Provided personnel positions. I think there were 24 positions, new positions that were in the budget. And we did make sure that it was reflected a balanced budget. Again, millage is addressed in the budget as well, with not only the increases, the new amounts, but also the impact on our taxpayers. So, and what's really critical, and Dr. Rodriguez keeps reminding me, is to always say that 100% of that millage increase that we're requesting and proposing is to fund teacher salary increases. So that is the message that is really important to us this year, and has been, it makes it very clear we have one priority, and that's it. So, so with that, that really concludes my presentation of the OE5.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the committee members?
No, sir.
Do we need a motion to recommend, sir?
We have it down here.
There's one.
I move to accept the operational expectations, number 5, financial planning.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Wisniewski, aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Discussion of presenting monthly transparency report to the Finance Committee. Tanya?
Yes, sir. So I don't have any documents or handouts for this discussion item, but it really sparked my interest. I believe Ms. Fidrich actually asked a question during a previous board meeting. Could these come before? Could the transparency reports that we provide on the second board meeting of each month that are in the superintendent's report, could those be presented to the Finance Committee? And so my response at that time was that previously we had not brought them forward because we didn't believe that the timing would allow staff to come after the last day of the month, be able to get them in a timely fashion before the Finance Committee meeting. However, we've been doing it a while now, so we're becoming more efficient at it. We've automated the processes. There are 3 reports there. There is the transparency report. There is the $100,000 report, both detailed and consolidated, and a board monthly budget report. So I would say at this point, after consulting with my staff, primarily Jennifer's staff, that they have all indicated that it would be able to be provided by the Finance Committee. So I wanted to bring that information forward, seek interest. If the committee is interested in that coming before the committee, it would allow more vetting in perhaps, and make the board meeting maybe a little more efficient by having most of that discussion in the committee. So I wanted to offer that as an opportunity and let you all decide.
So what you're presenting is that you would provide those reports to the Finance Committee for review. And then the Finance Committee could make a motion to include it into the consent agenda. And if a board member wishes to review it during the board meeting, during the discussion for a approval of the agenda, can move to bring that out, either one or all, out of the consent agenda and add it into the finance portion of the meeting. Is that correct?
Question, is it transparency, the 5K in the budget, or just the transparency report? You're moving all three of them.
All three.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm just letting you know that we are capable of bringing them forward, and it might provide more efficiency in a full board meeting to have that discussion in advance in the finance committee, or allow for more discussion to happen in the committee level. But then it can also go to the board, either consent or out of committee, or however the board chooses.
Right. So in other words, if it came into the finance committee and the finance committee had questions or concerns, then the finance committee could easily bring that before the full board. But if it's like, our board budget, which I've never heard anybody have any questions or comments about, we could look at it, say, yeah, it looks the same, there's nobody in trouble, put that part in the consent agenda.
And the documents would all go into the
And-
board meeting.
Yes, and all,
As well, for
all,
viewing. So they still get.
anybody could ask for even that one to be brought into the open session.
Exactly.
Okay, I just want to make sure I got your intent. So is there discussion from committee
Well, I was
members?
just thinking we probably should have a motion from our committee
Yeah.
that we
Recommend that we.
recommend this, and then, because that way they can vote it up or down.
Sure.
Sure, okay.
Sorry, I didn't prepare a motion for this.
Well,
one.
I would say, I move that the finance committee recommend to the full board bringing the monthly transparency report, the 100,000 report, I don't know if that's what we call it,
Mhm.
and the board budget monthly to the finance committee, and then the finance committee will vet, I guess you'd say vet the reports and bring forward to the board either as an action item or under
And place it on the agenda.
place on the
appropriate-
agenda.
Appropriately.
That's right. Yeah, and it pays
I
on
mean,
the business, yeah. Because that way we can see where it should go.
I move that the finance committee recommend to the full board bringing the monthly transparency report, the 100K report, and the monthly budget report.
No monthly board budget
Board
report
budget.
and report.
Budget report to the finance committee. Finance committee
To be vetted
to be vetted
and
And then-
provided to the full
and
board
provided to the full board
on the agenda in an appropriate manner.
on the agenda in appropriate manner. Period.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Any discussion?
We need a second. Earl.
Earl
Earl
seconded.
seconds.
Earl had already
Any,
seconded.
any discussion? Dr. Wisniewski?
No, sir.
Okay.
Aye.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And the next item is future topics.
I don't know, I would, we had talked about hall monitors. So should that go to the operation committee and then come back to you? See what it costs? It's pretty.
Probably, yes, sir, probably.
Could be next operation.
Monitors to the operations or to HR? I mean, HR is operations.
Let's go.
Never mind, never mind. I asked my own question.
Yeah, that sounds like.
Because I've had
Yeah.
several middle school principals talk to me about it. And that's
Hall
teachers.
monitors.
Yeah, teachers talk to me about it also.
Yeah.
We could probably, in the meantime, crunch some numbers and
Okay.
provide, work with the operations folks to provide that additional piece of information. So we'll do it together.
Okay, let me- thank you.
Any other comments, topics? Dr. Wisniewski, do you have anything?
No, sir, not this time.
Thank you. I don't have anything either.
I don't have anything.
So you want to talk about the next meeting? Dave?
Yeah.
Will be the-
Sounds good.
No, that's me. So the next meeting would be scheduled for July 14th. But currently, we don't have any future topics.
Yeah,
So
that's after the board meeting
on the 12th.
on the 12th.
Okay.
So then if we don't meet in July, then the meeting after that would be August the 11th.
Do you see a need for a meeting in July? Dr. Wisniewski, do you see a need for a meeting in July?
No, sir, I don't have any topics or anything in particular. So unless something comes up that we need to talk about, I'm good without it.
Okay, let's look at,
So,
Earl, do you have anything?
No,
Okay,
so August the 11th.
August the 11th.
Which is a Thursday.
Mhm.
That's good.
5 o'clock. That's good for me. I think for.
Rachel, August the 11th at 5 o'clock.
I know I will be driving back from being out of town, but I can always call in.
Okay.
Okay, great. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tanya.